Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today I'm going to kind of do a little video as a continuation of my little mini series I'm going to be putting together on building a racing drone. I was reminded today that some people may not know how to solder. They may not have ever seen anybody solder. So I'm going to kind of go over my little tricks, my little techniques for doing some soldering. I'm going to be soldering up just a couple pieces of wire, splicing them together, just kind of show you how that works. I'm going to be soldering on this old power distribution board that I have. It's not the one that I normally use on my builds, but it is a power distribution board that eventually, if you do build a drone, you're going to have to solder on at some point. So this is an extra one that I had laying around, so I'm going to do some soldering on that. I'm also going to show you guys soldering on a flight control board. These can be pretty tricky, and I'll get into that, but we're going to do a little bit of soldering on here just to kind of show you guys how it should be done. Okay, it's not the only way to do it, but it's the way I do it, and that's the way I prefer to do it, and it's worked well for me. Okay, we're just going to go ahead and get started here. We're going to take our wire strippers, wire cutters, just cut off a nice good chunk of that. We're going to split this in half, and come over here, grab my other strippers. I'm going to expose the ends, just one end of each wire. Alright, so one of the tricks that I like to do is I like to take the end of the wire, and to keep the strands from flaring out when I'm trying to solder, I like to twist these, twist the ends so it's nice and flat and round and together. Another thing that I did not, there's a couple things I did not mention on my your workbench video, is that one of the things that I really appreciate having is this, it's called I think it's called the helping hands. I got it off of Amazon for 25, 30 bucks, but it just allows me to place a wire in there and place a wire in there, and you can manipulate it and put it however you want. And it just kind of gives you an extra set of hands so that you're not trying to hold two pieces of wire together and then solder them up. But the other thing that I forgot to mention is that a lot of the times you're going to need some sort of flux. Solder does not like to flow on metal without some sort of bonding agent. I'm not sure if even that's the right kind of term for that, but what this does is this helps the solder flow in between the strands of copper, and it'll actually bond to the copper instead of the solder just rolling right off. And so what we're going to do is we're going to flip on our soldering iron, turn it up to temp. I like it a little over 400. Seems to be good for me. But what we're going to do here is we're going to get out your flux. Just going to take, and I'm going to dip that and get a little bit of flux on the end of that. I'm going to get a little bit of flux on this one as well. I'm literally just kind of stabbing it in there. I'm going to put it back in my clamps, and we'll see if my tips. Oh, and another thing here, I'm going to go and wet my sponge. A lot easier to clean your soldering iron. I've got my sponge wet, which will allow me to clean the tip of the soldering iron very well, so you'll kind of hear it, see the steam. So what we're just trying to do is just trying to clean the tip of it. A clean tip on your soldering iron is going to allow heat to transfer a lot better than a dirty tip. So we're just trying to get it clean. Okay, we've got our flux on the wires, and so what we're going to do is we're just going to apply some heat. What it's going to do, it's going to help sink that flux in between each strand, and it's going to allow the solder to actually bond to the copper. So let's heat it up. You can see there it's setting that flux in. Okay. So then what we want to do is we want to what's called pre-tin the wires. So I'm just going to take my solder and I'm going to heat it up and then apply the solder. And I want a nice liberal coating. Okay. Now then, now that that is tinned, all we need to do is get these wires positioned in a way to where they're going to stay put side by side. Some people like to twist those up. Some people like to actually intertwine the strands of copper. Personally, I think that's a big pain in the rear end, so I don't do that. So now that those two are together, looks like they're going to stay put. Just going to apply some heat, and that heat will transfer through one strand of copper into the other strand of copper, and then, well, if it doesn't pop apart, they'll usually flow the solder between the joint. Of course, this isn't wanting to cooperate. Okay, just like that right there. I'm going to clean this off for you. Okay, as you can see right here, I've got them soldered together. You don't want a bunch of clumps dripping off the bottom of your solders here, okay? You want this as nice and clean as possible. You can kind of see right here how the solder's flowed from the top strand down into the bottom strand, and it's got a nice weld in between both of them. It's got a nice bond. It's going to let that electricity pass through that quite nicely. Another thing that we're going to do, that I just about always do on any of my solder joints, is I'll come and I'll grab a piece of heat shrink tubing. Talked about that yesterday in our workbench video. Just going to slide this off here, and we're going to back the camera out. So we're going to put this here. Going to cut off a piece of this heat shrink tubing, just enough to cover the solder joint. Might need a bigger piece of yep, need a bigger one. So just gonna reach in here, grab one of my spares. So you can see here that this is a little bit bigger than the wire, which is perfect because it'll fit over that solder joint nicely. Just gonna kind of split that there. We're gonna grab our hot air gun. Okay, we're just gonna come over here, and then we're just gonna shrink that up. We're gonna cover the joint. You do not want that joint exposed. Really easy if that joint is exposed to have it cross a piece of carbon fiber, and whatever voltage that's passing through this wire is going to transfer through your carbon fiber frame on your drone, and it's going to short out. You're going to see a lot of magic smoke go somewhere, okay? So that's one thing you don't want. So one thing you always want to do is make sure that you solder that joint properly, and that you cover it with heat shrink tape. Liquid electrical tape will work in a pinch. I don't suggest that. I always suggest nice heat shrink. It's going to make your solder joint look really nice and professional, like it was supposed to be that way. Okay, can you see right there how that solder is balling up? It's not wanting to bond to the plate. That's because there's no flux on it. Flux helps the solder bond to what you're soldering on. Now then, watch this on one of these pads that has flux on it. I'm going to apply some heat to it. Let's go with one of these bottom pads here. I'm going to apply some heat to it. Now you see there? See how it's got a nice bond? It bubbled up nicely, and it's got a nice shiny sheen to that. So that if you wanted to go and put that bond that wire to there, actually let's just go ahead and do that right now. So now then, what we're going to do is we're just going to we're going to set this on top here. We're going to set it on top of that solder. We're going to set the iron on top of the copper wire, and we're going to let the heat transfer through that copper wire into the solder on the power distribution board. Okay, it's going to be kind of hard to see right now, but you've got a nice clean solder to the power distribution board. One of the things that you can do is you can take some rubbing alcohol and you can clean that up. You're not going to hurt any electronics with rubbing alcohol because it's going to evaporate really quickly. But you've got a nice good clean solder there. That's what you want to see. You don't want to see just a real rough looking mound over the copper wire. You've got a good clean bond, and that's pretty much it. Alright guys, hey, I appreciate you guys tuning in. This was part 2, video number 2 of the mini-series How to Build a Drone. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I hope I was able to show you guys, just kind of a little bit about soldering. It's not hard. It really isn't. It sounds a lot harder than it is. You just need a little bit of practice and a lot of patience. It took me a while to get my soldering hand down to where I wasn't super shaky everywhere. But anyways, stay tuned because the next part is going to be frame assembly and then motor assembly. I'll probably be doing the ESCs the same as well. And then we're probably going to be a couple week break while I, save up some cash and get some more parts in. But anyways, thanks again for tuning in, and I look forward to giving you guys video number 3. Thanks.